Hi, Gerhard Bloom, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So this piece is entitled Timely Reflections on Cultural Suicide. And if you want to know what manifestations I am talking about, look at France and what's happening in France. And this is undoubtedly going to take place across the entirety of Western Europe. The mass of recent Muslim immigrants, they are not assimilating. They are trying to impose their cultural values and norms on the rest of the world. The United States and Canada, we've done a very good job in relative terms of assimilating Muslim immigrants. I have Muslim friends, by the way. But yeah, this cancerous rioting that's going on in France, that is symptom of a cultural suicide. We are standing by, and particularly in Europe, as the norms and institutions that have maintained Western civilization for centuries are being attacked, and the French government largely sitting on its hands. So here we are. The New York Times tells you that the phrase female genital mutilation shouldn't be used. No, it's culturally loaded, didn't you know? Oh, how sensitive. We wouldn't want those who practice this bit of cultural barbarism to feel offended, would we? And so this is where we are at. We are standing by like absolute dummies as our most basic values erode, and they're actually being attacked. Along with the recent flood of Muslim immigrants, we have seen horrors equal to a Stephen King movie acted out across Western Europe, Canada, the United States, and I've got a friend in Australia. Loving parents, relative to this female genital mutilation stuff, routinely send their daughters off to have the external genital tissue scraped off with rusty razors back home. And this is occurring right here in Canada where I live. And how do we know? Well, because doctors in Ontario have had to perform over 300 corrective surgeries to try and mitigate the worst of these horrors. That's from the Toronto Sun, 21st August 2017. And what does the Canadian government do? It does nothing. They wouldn't want to risk the imaginary bigotry of Islamophobia. In the United States, people are arrested. In Canada, we do exactly nothing. And don't these girls deserve our protection? In my world, the parents would be jailed, the daughters rescued from these parents, and then the parents, after serving a decade in jail, back to the shithole country that they came from. And the recent flood of Muslims into the West bring along with them cultural commitments and beliefs that are incompatible with our societies. And at the risk of courting offense, and I don't really care if you're offended, I would say incompatible with civilization and civilized society. Of course, we know already about the Muslim terrorism. Do you also know about the honor killings, the forced suicides? Growing up, did you ever hear of such a thing? This occurs everywhere you find recent Muslim immigrants, and in proportionate to their numbers. And could this really be simply coincidental? In Europe, these tragedies are routine. And this has happened in Canada and the United States. Parents forcing their children to commit suicide, otherwise they'll kill the child themselves, for shaming the dignity of Islam, by, say, dating somebody who's non-Muslim. And in Europe, there's been the recent rapid and dramatic rise in rapes, including gang rapes, And the so-called honor killings, yes, correlated to the relative rates of the Muslim immigrants. And I know you have Muslim friends. They are not terrorists. They don't practice this bit of barbarism. So how is it I can so confidently associate Islam with these horrors? Simply put, the Islam of moderate Muslims or modernist Muslims is a domesticated Islam. It is an Islam informed by secular modernist values and culture. It has been shaped by civilizational pressures. And this domestication of Islam does not happen in the Muslim world. And this is also not the Islam that much of the world practices. And it is certainly not the Islam of Muhammad. Islam took a 9-year-old child as his wife. Right? He had sex slaves. He cut the heads off of prisoners. Does that remind you of, say, ISIS? Yes, following in the footsteps of Muhammad. And yes, Christianity and Islam are both proselytizing religions. They go about it in very different ways. Christianity was spread by speaking to people's hearts and existential needs. A message of peace and love. Islam literally spread by the sword. And no, the Crusades were not about spreading Christianity. They were about liberating the Holy Lands. Oh yes, these lands that the Crusaders were attempting to liberate, they were Christian and Jewish lands centuries before Islam overtook them. And just as the figure of Christ represents the moral exemplar for Christians, so Muhammad is for the Muslim. And I know you've heard politicians and journalists say that the terrorists offer a misreading of Islam. This is a lie. ISIS reads Islam properly. The Islam that Muhammad preached, and they are following Muhammad's example. The jihad, the sex slaves, the beheadings. Yeah, Islam and Muhammad. Islam explicitly divides the world into the house of Dar al-Islam and the house of Dar al-Harab. Dar Islam, the world under Sharia law and dominance, submitting to Islam. Islam means submission. And Dar al-Harab, the house of war. Guess where we live? And the world will be at war until we submit. That is Islamic theology. This is what Muhammad preached. And for 1400 years, there's been this attempt to bring the world under divine sanctioned law. And for the devout Muslim, democracy, the rule of men by the laws of men, is apostasy. It's apostasy. And am I serious? Well, riddle me this, smarty pants. If I'm a father who just killed my own daughter or forced her into suicide for the sin of polluting her soul by dating a non-Muslim man or for renouncing Islam, or I just killed my gay son, what do you think I think about gay marriage or liberal values or women's rights? Nothing says sincerity than killing your own child. And the modernist species of Islam is a very precious and rare specimen. It is not the Islam of millions of Muslims, the Islam that millions of Muslims adhere to. And the fastest growing religion on the planet, including in Western Europe, is the Islam that the Prophet intended. And unless this conspiracy of silence stops over the barbarism that is inherent to Islam, Islam will not reform. In Muslim countries, critics are killed. In fact, they are killed across the globe. And you draw an effing cartoon of Muhammad or dare to show an offensive item, you just might get killed. I had people worrying about me getting killed. I'm like, well, you better make your best attempt. Because if I get you before you get me, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And I will go down on my feet, not on my knees. I am not submitting. So go ahead, call me a bigot if it makes you feel superior. I'm the guy on the side of the 9-year-old child being pawned off to a 60-year-old pedophile under the guise of child marriage. I'm on the side of the girl whose parents are trying to perform the brutal act of genital mutilation. I'm the guy who's trying to protect women from being gang raped by Muslim thugs who think that these Western women are whores. And I'm on the side of the Jew who has to flee Europe with his family. A Europe that had promised never again, although it's happening. Jews are being attacked relentlessly by Muslims in Western Europe. No, it's not neo-Nazis. No, the overwhelming attacks by Jews in Europe, Muslims. And I'm on the side of any Muslim who wants to renounce their commitment to this barbaric religion and wants them to live free. And I mean this in all sincerity, A word of caution. Do not assume you can read the conscience of your fellow human being. The woman who's dressed as the very angel of death just might be somebody as eager to escape Islam as I am eager to see her escape it. And across the world, there are hundreds of thousands of Muslims who are living under the oppression of Islam and would like nothing more than to escape it. And you can't tell at a glance what constellation of beliefs and commitments they have. So no. And like I say, I have Muslim friends, wonderful people. So please check out my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. It's available on Amazon. It's not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues could not be more important. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Bye-bye.